Hey guys, it's Trisha with Upcycled Stuff. Today I'm going to show you how to make these really quick and easy Christmas tree earrings out of paper beads. Let me just get a little closer here. So we're going to do some cone-shaped paper beads, and we're just going to dangle them with some wooden beads to make it look like a stem. These ones here I made with some scrap of scrapbooking paper that someone gave me, and I thought they kind of look like sort of country Christmas trees like you would find in a country style home. But the ones I'm going to make today on camera we'll do a little bit darker green, and I'm just using this folder. It was like a handout at a convention, so I just used the bottom, the little pockets here that were folded inside. So it's just half the width of the folder, not the opened version. And so from whatever green you use, if it's a magazine or newspaper, anything green colored that you want to use, you'll need to cut 2 strips in triangular shapes. So I use a base width of about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. You can judge however tall you want your Christmas tree. That'll be based on whatever size you make this width. So go ahead and just cut. This is probably 8.5 inches long. But you can play with that too, it doesn't have to be exact. So 2 green colored strips of paper cut to triangles. For rolling your bead, you'll need a toothpick. For a quick seal, you'll just need a glue stick. And then for a permanent seal, we'll use 2 things. We're going to use a decoupage. You don't have to use this brand, it just happens to be what I use. So a decoupage glue that I mix with 50-50 water and glue. And then I use this Liquitex varnish. It's a high gloss varnish, but you can use matte if you prefer. And I use this straight. This doesn't get mixed with water. For stringing and drying your beads, you're going to need just a little length of fishing wire. For drying your beads, I usually use a bead box, and you can see more about that in one of my other video tutorials. But for today, just because we're doing 2 beads, I'm going to use a Starbucks cup along with that fishing wire and a dome lid. You want to make sure it's a dome lid. And then your jewelry making tools that you'll need. You'll need 2 head pins, 2 ear wires. You'll need 2 seed beads of some sort. Like I said, I'm using these small wooden seed beads, but you can use brown glass or anything that your heart desires. And the tools, you'll need a flush cutter, a needle nose plier, and either a round nose or a chain nose plier. Okay, so let's get rolling our paper bead. I'm going to loosen up this paper since it's a little bit thicker, more like a cardstock rather than like newspaper or magazine. I'm just going to use a bamboo skewer and run it like you would curling ribbon, just a couple times, but especially at this thicker end, just to get it loosened up. And then I'm going to take my toothpick and place it right at the top here, and then just start working that around the toothpick a little bit so it loosens up more, and then I'm ready to roll. So I'm just going to start rolling. I'm not going to worry too much about lining anything up at this point. I do want to make note that I am not using glue along the length of this paper bead. I know some people do that. If you do that, you're not going to be able to make any adjustments to the shape of the bead, which we need to do. So save it for the last couple of inches. Just take your glue stick and use quite a bit of it on the tail of that bead, and then finish rolling it. And then if you're using a thicker paper, you're going to need to hold on to it for a second, just so that it sticks. Sometimes I'll use crazy glue on, like when I use cardboard and such, because it works a little bit faster, but you have to be careful because your fingers will stick to the paper and it can take some of the color off. Plus your fingers become a hot mess. But so you'll just keep holding that, and then once it's properly sealed, you'll have your paper bead that's shaped like this, which is a pretty typical shape for a piece of paper that started off as a triangle. But we want to make it look like a tree. So you're just gonna take the bottom, one of the bottom ends, and push while using your finger to pull down these ridges. And if you had put glue on this all along the length, you wouldn't be able to do this. So I'm gonna give the second one a try. So that one's looking a little bit better than the first one did, but they don't always work out. That's why we make multiple beads and then pick the ones we like the best. All right, so there's a nice looking little cone-shaped bead in green. Now we're gonna go ahead and glaze these. Okay, the first step in glazing is to add a little bit of decoupage. And I do this because I find that if I'm only using a glue stick to hold my bead together, the varnish tends to eat through it, and when they're on the bead drying rack, the ends will pop open more readily than if I decoupage them first. So that's why I do this step first. So I do, again, 50% decoupage to water, so half and half, and I add it to a cup. And these are just my Starbucks cups. You've seen these if you've watched my videos before. And I leave it in here. I just take one of the lids and I cover with painter's tape or any kind of tape the straw hole so that it stays airtight. And then I can use it next time because I obviously can't put the watered down decoupage back into the same bottle. So go ahead and mix it up in a cup. And then you're gonna take a piece of the fishing string, and I actually put a pop tab. I tie a pop tab on the end, or a tab from a soup can or something, just to keep the beads from falling off. And if you saw my video on a bead box, it also helps keep, it gives a place for the string of beads to grab onto my bead box. So again, that's in another video. I'll leave a link below to that one. So go ahead and string your 2 beads onto your fishing string. Okay, and for this one here, it doesn't need to be, this fishing string is really long. You don't need it to be quite that long, because we're going to use a Starbucks cup and a dome lid, or any kind of dome lid cup that you have laying around the house. So take your decoupage glue. Everything tends to stick, but here we go. And then you're just going to dip it into your decoupage glue down to the bottom and shake it around so that it gets fully coated. Bring it back out, and then you're gonna hit it on the side of your cup a couple of times to get all that extra goopiness off. You have to be really careful when you're doing the dipping method, because if there's a lot of it on there, as it dries, it'll start to, let me get it off. There. It'll start to pool up on the bottom of the bead, and if you don't catch it in time, it'll dry big glob, and it doesn't look very good. So once you've got the decoupage glue on, you're going to take your dome lid, I don't do this all the time, so bear with me. There we go. And you're going to put your lid over that fishing string. Keep it nice and taut. Okay, so now you have 2 beads suspended. They're not going to touch the sides, and it's not going to mess up your decoupage. But you can see, well, I can see, I don't know if you can, that there's glue starting to pool up on the bottom of the beads. But that's okay. You're going to separate these, and then just use like a bamboo skewer or something, or even your finger, just to flick the fishing wire around. And you'll start to see bits and pieces of decoupage glue hitting the sides of your can. And that's taking all the excess off. All right. And then you'll keep doing that until it looks, you can even use your skewer if it's a big blob, like I have a really bad looking one here. Just to even that out a little bit. And you're gonna set this aside to dry, but while it's drying, especially if you're not using like a cardstock thickness paper, you need to make sure you keep these beads moving so there's not an exact science, but I usually do, when I first put my beads on the string, I'll keep them moving, like within the first 10 minutes I'll move it for the first time, just move it up and down the string. so that the glue doesn't stick your bead to the fishing wire, because if it dries on there and you go to pull your bead off, the insides of your bead will unravel from the inside. So just keep it kind of moving a little bit. Continue to check for blobs, and then you know, check again in 15-20 minutes, something like that. After the first couple of times, you don't need to worry too much about it sticking, but I'm going to set this aside for about an hour to dry. Once your beads are dry, you can come in and take your lid off. And then take your, I do the same thing with the varnish. I put it into a cup, even though you don't have to mix it with water. It just makes the dipping process easier. It's a little bit more gross on the inside, but you'll do the same thing. Take the string, dip it inside your varnish, put it back on here, replace the lid, and then do the same thing with the with your bamboo skewer. Flick the wire around a little bit, make sure you don't get any globs of varnish. And if you're using a thicker paper, you might want to do a second coat of the varnish. So once those are dry, it's time to make our jewelry. Here's a couple that I made earlier today. So they're nice and dry, they look like little Christmas trees, and we're gonna go ahead and turn those into earrings now. Okay, so this is a pretty simple setup here. You're gonna take your head pin and put on a wooden bead, and take one of your Christmas trees, your cone-shaped beads, and pop that on there. And then all we need to do is make a loop at the top for hanging. So you're gonna take your needle nose plier, set it right at the top of your Christmas tree, and then bend it a 90-degree angle. Okay, now you're gonna take your flush cutter, and a good way to measure how far you wanna cut is if you put your finger right up against your bead and hold the wire flat on your finger. This just gives you a way to cut the wire on both earrings the same length without actually getting out a tape measure, which I don't think anyone ever does. Put the flush cutter up against your finger or wherever is comfortable for you, but I find that this is about a good length. And then cut it. Take your round nose plier, that might even be a little bit big, and then place it on the end of that wire that you just cut and roll it toward you. And keep rolling until you have a little loop. Okay, so you'll do the same thing with the other earring, and then you're going to take one of your ear wires, and I just used my needle nose because I'm going to open up this ear wire only slightly. So I open it up just a little bit, drop on your earring, and then I just squeeze it back closed. But be careful not to flatten out your loop on your ear wire. Okay, so one last time, you'll take your eye pin or your head pin, drop on your wooden bead, then your cone bead. Make sure your head pin is pushed nice and tight up against all your beads there. Make a 90-degree bend right at the top of your tree. Cut. And then roll your wire towards you. Open up your ear wire just a little bit. Drop on your little bead packet there and close up the ear wire again. And then there you have it. And as you can see, it just depends on the kind of paper that you use. This was the cardstock style paper, and this was just scrapbooking paper. And if you were to use paper from like a magazine or something, it would probably still be even thinner than this. Just because it's even thinner than the paper. So if you wanted to make it thicker, you can make your pieces longer, but you would get a different effect. But they're a fun gift, you know, either for yourself or for friends, families, co-workers, and Secret Santa gifts and that sort of thing. And pretty much no one else is going to have them. So enjoy making them. If you have questions, just post them below.